It was only the 22nd of December in the year 1990, but that didn't stop Vaughn Taylor from kicking off the holiday early, as he sat by the tree pulling out gift after gift and opening them in front of an old VHS camera. Behind that camera was Edward Deli, a longtime companion of Vaughn who seemed adamant on filming his friend's reaction to the presents.
How come you got a light flashing on the front of that?
I don't know.
Find out.
How am I supposed to find out?
And LeMay. Come on, cat stuff. Oh, wow.
What is it?
Baseball card.
Okay.
The video is a bit awkward, as the two momentarily bicker about the camera recording, and Vaughn hardly seems to acknowledge or show any sort of gratitude in response to the gifts he's receiving, but it's seemingly nothing too out of the ordinary, and is probably reminiscent of so many other home videos out there of friends and family members timidly opening up their presents, except for one overshadowing detail, with that being who these men actually are. Before this video was taken, both Vaughn and Edward had served time in prison, Edward for arson and Taylor for aggravated burglary, and upon their release it was hoped that the two were now reformed and would be able to live more lawful lives, which could not have been further from the truth. Almost immediately upon being released, Vaughn would call one of his friends to tell them that both he and Edward had plans to go into the mountains and, quote-unquote, shoot some people. And from there, they set off into the wilderness of Oakley, Utah. On their expedition, the two stumbled across various cabins where they would break in and either camp out for a while or just completely ransack the place, as in most cases, the owners of these cabins were long gone for the winter due to the inclement weather of the area. Though this wasn't true for everyone, as during the same time, the Tita family, consisting of Father Rolf, his wife Kay, and their two children, Lene and Trish, along with their 76-year-old grandmother, Beth Potts, had been staying in their cabin to celebrate Christmas together. And so, on the morning of the 22nd, the family would go into nearby Salt Lake City to finish off the last of their Christmas shopping, leaving the cabin unattended at the exact same time that Vaughn and Edward happened to be strolling through the area. Upon breaking in, the two quickly recognized that whoever was living there had only just momentarily stepped away and would be returning at the very latest by Christmas, as evidenced by the gifts sitting under the tree. And finding their first real opportunity to carry out their intended goal of murder, the two hunkered down and waited for the family to arrive back home. While hiding out, it's unknown what exactly the two had done to pass the time, except for a brief few minutes in which Edward would pick up the family's VHS camera and record Vaughn as he tore into the family's gifts. The added context makes this video all the more disturbing, as Vaughn was opening gifts belonging to the family that they were waiting to kill. And it's made all the more chilling when you notice that Vaughn is carrying a gun, along with the moment that he says Lene Tita's name as he reads it on the gift wrapping.
And LeMay.
And worst of all is that the gravity of the situation they were currently in clearly had no impact on these two men, as they were completely emotionless. And unsurprisingly, things only get darker from here, as after a few hours, Beth, Kay, and Lene would pull into the driveway. Upon entering the house, the pair of men would immediately point their guns at the family and start making demands, to which Lene responded by praying to God that her and her family be spared, which was of no use, as Edward turned to her and claimed that her prayers wouldn't work, as he only worshipped the devil. And moments later, the two would grab her mother and grandmother and end their lives for no apparent reason. This left only 20-year-old Lene, who tried desperately to convince the men to leave, knowing in the back of her mind that her father Rolf and sister Trish would be arriving soon. But it was to no avail, as her pleading was interrupted by the sound of another snowmobile pulling into the driveway. Upon exiting their vehicle, both Trish and Rolf would be held at gunpoint, with Rolf being told to strip his clothes and give up all his money. Again, pleas were made to just take anything and leave them alone, but the two men remained unfazed. They wanted to cause pain and anguish to anyone and everyone, and nothing was going to stop them. And so Vaughn pointed his gun at Rolf and pulled the trigger, striking the man in the face before delivering one final blow to the back of his head, leaving just the two daughters. Having thoroughly decimated what just an hour before was a happy, healthy family, Vaughn and Edward would cover Rolf and the cabin in gasoline and set them on fire, before hijacking the snowmobiles with the two remaining daughters and driving away down the hill to a nearby road. However, they weren't alone. On their way out, the kidnappers and their victims would notice a man waving to them in the distance, with the individual being Randy Zorn, their uncle, who recognized the two girls and attempted to flag them down. However, knowing that had they acknowledged their relationship, it would almost certainly get the man killed, they chose to ignore him and told the kidnappers that they had no idea who he was. Sensing something was off, Randy would follow the group down the mountain where the men were now loading into the family's car. He waved to them once more, this time yelling at the group to stop and even running after them, but again the girls pretended not to know them, sacrificing a chance at being saved in order to protect their uncle. Confused by this bizarre encounter and apparent urgency from the girls, Randy began to fear that something bad had happened at the family cabin, which was only confirmed when he heard another snowmobile tearing down the mountain. On it was a barely clothed Rolf, who despite being shot in the head twice, set on fire, and his eyes being almost completely swollen shut, was somehow alive and had managed to get on a snowmobile to find help. And it was there that he told Randy, "I've been shot, my wife has been killed, and my daughters have been kidnapped." Something that most likely saved the lives of those two girls, as the police were contacted and were able to quickly track down the vehicle, where the kidnappers would accidentally run it right off the road, flipping it over multiple times before crashing into a ravine. Quite shockingly, no one would be badly injured in the wreck, and following a brief shootout, Vaughn and Edward gave in and were swiftly arrested, bringing this whole nightmare to an end. When the dust eventually settled, Edward would end up receiving life in prison, while Vaughn, the man shown here opening the family's gifts, was sentenced to death, with both men reportedly being visibly shocked at the sight of Rolf when he showed up to court to testify against them. Rolf would later go on to make a full recovery, which definitely ends the story off on an empowering note, though the carnage left behind by these two men in the moments following this video make it undoubtedly one of the darkest on the site.